Welcome to video 3 of chapter 5, where we will look at the birth experience. Okay, so in the first stage of labor, there are 3 phases. This first stage takes approximately between 10 to 20 hours on average at least for first-time mothers. It's usually less for later births. And in the first phase of the first stage, we have early labor. The contractions are usually not painful, and the cervix begins to thin out and dilate. I mean, basically, dilate just means it begins to open up. The contractions during early labor typically last between 30 to 60 seconds, and they come every 5 to 20 minutes. As the cervix starts to open, a mucus plug is discharged from the vagina. This has been called the bloody show in some instances. At this point, the expectant mother would typically still be at home. In the second phase of first stage of labor, we have active labor. So the contractions start to become longer, stronger, and more frequent. The cervix dilates from 4 to 7 centimeters, and this lasts on average between 3 to 8 hours. When the contractions get to lasting 1 minute and they come every 5 minutes or so, that's when a woman should typically get to the hospital or birthing center. And then once she is in the hospital or birthing center, she would usually go into the transition phase. The contractions come in rapid succession. They last up to 90 seconds each. This transition phase typically lasts between 15 minutes to 3 hours, and it ends when the cervix is dilated from 7 centimeters now up to 10 centimeters. This is the number they're looking for. I know this is in centimeters. 10 centimeters is about, what is it? 4 inches is, I think. I'm trying to remember my conversion. Yeah, I believe that's 4 inches or so. Okay. This transition phase is the most difficult of the 3 phases because the contractions are rapid and strong. For most women, the amniotic sac will rupture during the transition phase. This is what you call the water breaking. And typically it happens near the end of the transition phase when she's getting ready to give birth. It can happen sooner, certainly. It may happen in one of the earlier phases before the woman even gets to the hospital or the birthing center. But it more typically happens in this third phase, the transition phase. So once you finish the transition phase and the cervix has dilated, opened up to 10 centimeters, the woman is typically then ready to give birth. So then we enter the second stage of labor. Here we go. Okay. And in the second stage of labor, contractions begin to push the baby down through the birth canal. With each contraction, the woman will feel an urge to push. Sometimes during this stage, an episiotomy may be performed, which is an incision between the vagina and the anus in order to prevent tearing of the tissue. So if the doctor or nurse or midwife, or well, actually probably a midwife wouldn't do this, but if the doctor feels that that tearing will occur with the birth, then he may perform this episiotomy. It's much cleaner to surgically make the incision rather than it to split apart on its own, and it will heal much cleaner and quicker. The use of an episiotomy has really declined in the last 10 years. Currently, it happens in about 11% of vaginal deliveries. The delivery of the baby happens during the second stage of labor. The umbilical cord then is clamped and cut, and if the baby is in no danger, she or he will be placed upon the mother's chest normally at this point. In the third stage of labor, the delivery of the placenta happens. This lasts about 5 to 10 minutes, typically, and normally it's without pain or discomfort. Okay, and those are the 3 stages of labor. So there's a number of birthing options. You could give birth in a hospital, at home, in a birthing center. In the US, though, only about 1.5% of births are done outside of a hospital setting. Although birthing centers are becoming more popular, and many of them are attached to hospitals, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. You've got the hospital there in case of complications or emergencies, but you get the comfort of the birthing center. Birthing centers. My daughter was born in a birthing center in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was a very comfortable setting. The room that we stayed in was looked much more like a hotel room than a hospital room. There was a couch there that I could sleep on, and the baby was kept in the room with us, and it was just a very comfortable setting. It would, the surgical aspects of the room are kind of hidden away, and it like I said, it feels more like a hotel kind of room setting. Okay. Who helps with the delivery? Well, it could be a doctor. Typically, if it's in the hospital, it would be a doctor. It could be a nurse. If it's a birth at home or in a birthing center, either a nurse or a midwife may perform the birth. A doula is sometimes used during the birth experience. And a doula is a trained, knowledgeable companion that would support the woman through the pregnancy, through the labor, and through the delivery. The doula doesn't actually deliver the baby, though, whereas a midwife is trained to deliver a baby. So the doula is an emotional support, especially useful in cases where there may not be a significant other that can attend, or if there's no close person that can attend the birth, somebody may hire a doula to that will stick by and give emotional support to the woman throughout the whole process. Certainly in non-Western cultures, the birth process may be quite different than we're used to. And your book provides one example. The Ifaluk women, Ifaluk, they're in Micronesia, the small country of Micronesia. The woman giving birth in that culture kneels on a mat, and she helps the baby out herself while kneeling. And she's supposed to do it without showing any distress or pain. And then once the baby comes out, the woman's mother will take the baby and wash it in the ocean. So a little bit different. The birth experience for the baby can be quite traumatic. If you think about it, the baby's been in a warm, quiet, dark environment, and the baby leaves that environment into a bright, noisy, cold environment. So it is a traumatic transition for the baby. Excuse me. One thing that helps the baby in this process is that when the baby experiences the uterine contractions and often, moments of oxygen deprivation, then the baby will release stress hormones into its system, which helps prepare the baby to survive the ordeal. When the baby is born, they will take an APGAR assessment of the baby, both at 1 minute post-birth and then again at 5 minutes. The APGAR is named after Virginia Apgar. She was a nurse who came up with this procedure many, many decades ago. I don't have an exact year, but some people always thought it was called the APGAR because it does make a nice acronym, as you can see here. The first letters of each of these things that are checked with the APGAR assessment, they do spell the word APGAR, but it is actually named after the woman who came up with it. Anyways, in the APGAR assessment, they test 5 different conditions: activity level, pulse, grimace, or reflex irritability. For instance, like if the baby sneezes, and then it's showing that it has a reflex ability. If the baby cries, this would also indicate that it's showing a reflex irritability. Appearance, is the baby nice and pink, or is it somewhat blue? And respiration, they check how the baby's breathing. And anyways, each of these 5 conditions is assessed on a 0 to 2 scale. So the baby receives a 0, 1, or 2 score. Higher is better. So the maximum possible APGAR score is a 10 if the baby was to receive 2 for each of them, which is fairly rare at the 1 minute mark. But any score between 7 to 10 is considered good or normal. They're taking it at 1 minute and then again at 5 minutes. And this is to see if the baby is progressing with their APGAR score, or are the numbers going down between 1 and 5 minutes. So although, I said that 7 to 10 is a normal score, if the baby was at 7 at the 1 minute mark and then declined to a 5, then this would indicate something's wrong, obviously. So 7 to 10 is good or normal. 4 to 6 indicates that some intervention is needed. If the score was to be 3 or less, this means that immediate life-saving intervention is needed for this baby. Okay, so that is the APGAR scale. And once again, they hope to see an improvement in the total score between 1 minute and 5 minutes. The newborn has all of its senses. It can hear, as it says here, see, taste, smell, and respond to touch, but they have a very limited capacity to process the information that they're sensing, from the environment. So this is like sensation without perception. The sensation of what, light rays are entering their eyes and sound waves are entering their ears. They're getting all the sensations from the world, but they're not really perceiving things. They're not seeing things clearly, and they're not understanding what the noise is that they hear. Perception relies on experience to make sense of what your sensations are that you're receiving. So they have sensation without real perception. The infant has a variety of states. These are different levels of consciousness. They're used to regulate the amount of stimulation an infant receives. The most common state is the sleep state. Newborns typically sleep between 16 to 18 hours per day, and about half of that sleep is in the REM state. In case anyone doesn't know, REM stands for rapid eye movement, and that is the state where we typically do most of our dreaming. An adult human spends about 20% of a full night's sleep in a REM state, whereas the newborn spending half of their sleep in the REM state, and the other half in what's called non-REM. This is an interesting finding, and it supports one of the major theories about what REM sleep is really for. And one of the theories states that REM sleep is when we do most of our memory consolidation. And so, you consolidate new things that you've learned during the day, when you're in the REM state. They found this in a study where they prevented people from entering REM state in their sleeps. They would wake them up every time they started to dream. And what they found was that these people had very bad memories for the time period that they were missing REM sleep. And so through, with that experiment, we found out, well, it must be that REM sleep helps to consolidate, consolidate meaning to make firm, your memories, like to make your memories longer lasting and more accessible. And so if you think about it, it makes sense that a newborn would be having so much REM sleep because everything is new to the newborn, so it has to consolidate a lot of new information. It's learning about the world through what it's receiving through its senses. And so all that time spent in REM state is probably consolidation of all the new information that they're experiencing. So you have more REM sleep when you're born than at any other time during life. The other awake states include being drowsy, quietly alert, actively alert, or crying. And these are the various states that the newborn would be in when they're not sleeping. Okay, and that will conclude video 3 from chapter 5.